Hello and welcome. In this tutorial, we will explore how to use colliders in Unity to detect collisions and interactions between game objects. What is a collider in Unity? A collider is a component in Unity that defines the shape of an object for physical interactions. It allows an object to detect collisions with other objects in the scene. Colliders come in different shapes like box collider, sphere collider, capsule collider, and mesh collider. These can be attached to objects to enable physics-based interactions. What is oncollisionenter? Oncollisionenter collision is a Unity event function that runs when two objects physically collide with each other. Requirements: both objects must have a collider. At least one of the objects must have a rigid body for physics interactions. What is a trigger? OnTriggerenter. A trigger is a special type of collider that does not cause physical collisions, but instead detects when an object enters its area. To use a trigger, enable its trigger on the collider component. At least one object must have a rigid body. First, to test the collider, we'll create a simple scene where our character will be a sphere. We'll place a wall in the scene for our sphere to interact with. Both the sphere and the wall will need a collider component attached to them, as they can detect physical collisions. The collider on the sphere will allow it to detect when it touches the wall, and vice versa. This way, we'll be able to test how Unity handles collision detection between the two objects and see how it reacts when they come into contact. Let's set that up. Before we test the collider, let's set up our sphere's movement by applying force. Just like we learned it in the previous lesson with the rigid body component. We will write a simple script that will allow us to apply a force to the sphere and make it move around the scene. This way, our sphere will be able to interact with the wall and we can test the collision functionality properly. Let's hit play and see if our sphere moves as expected. Now that our sphere is moving, let's set up the oncollisionenter function to detect when our sphere collides with the wall. In this function, we'll add a simple debug log statement to print a message to the console confirming the collision. So whenever the sphere touches the wall, Unity will trigger this function and we'll be able to see the collision message. Let's go ahead and implement the oncollisionenter code now. Yes, now our sphere has collided with the wall. As you can see in the console, the oncollisionenter function successfully triggered, and the game object's name that the sphere collided with has been logged. Now, let's move on to ontrigger. Instead of detecting physical collisions like oncollisionenter, ontrigger allows us to detect when one object enters the trigger area of another. This can be useful for events like pickups, areas of effect, or when we just want to know when something passes through a specific zone. Now, let's test the ontrigger functionality. First, ensure that we've set the collider component of the wall or any other object to is trigger in the inspector. This will turn it into a trigger zone instead of a physical collider. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.